I'm addicted to gambling. I made my last bet November the 12th of 2022, and today I wanted to respond to some of the questions that you guys have asked me about my gambling addiction and about gambling addiction in general. How did you finally know it was time to stop gambling? I gambled compulsively for 6 years, and on average, I was gambling for like 12 hours a day. And people are always like, what does that mean to gamble for 12 hours a day? Well, I wasn't necessarily staring at a screen spinning a slot for 12 hours, but I was constantly thinking about gambling and placing bets. So I would have bets active for at least 12 hours a day. And then for a couple hours during that day, I would be spinning slots or I would be watching the games that I had bet on. So it was just a constant preoccupation. What finally made me realize that it was time to stop, there was 2 specific instances. The first was February 8th of 2022. I was in Paris on a trip that I had paid for with gambling money, and I felt like such a big shot. And I was sitting on the toilet in the hotel room after just getting there, spinning slots just 2 hours after I got there, until I had lost all the money that I came with. And once I ran out of money, I asked myself, why did you just do that? I didn't have an answer anymore. It was ridiculous. Why did I just do that? I'd taken this trip, I felt like the big shot, and I just wasted it all. It was gone in just a moment. So that was kind of the first step. I went a couple of months after that without gambling, and then I had a relapse on November the 12th of 2022. That day, I took out cash advances to max out 3 different credit cards, and I went on a 12-hour gambling binge. And that 12 hours was actually gambling the entire time at a casino. I put myself into debt for what would be the next 6 months, working 80 hours per week. And what finally got me to stop was once again this thought of, it's always going to be the same. It's always going to end the same way. I had dropped a bunch of money on the floor. I picked it up in a panic, and then I realized I was better off throwing it back on the floor because I was just going to gamble it all away. So in summary, what made me realize I needed to stop gambling? When I realized that I couldn't stop gambling and that I was doing it because I was used to doing it. Should I try to get my money back before I quit gambling? No. No, you shouldn't. Being straight up and honest with you, but it's an excuse that you can make to keep gambling, right? It's an easy justification. I can't quit, I'm down money. I have all this debt, how will I ever pay it back? I have to go out and get the big win or else I'm gonna be in a terrible financial position. The truth is though, you're in that position because you gambled, more likely than not. And so this idea that you're gonna fix it by gambling more is actually a little bit ridiculous. Really, it's just an excuse to let you keep placing that next bet. You have to kind of look at any money that you lost gambling as your tuition. You had to pay that much money to learn that gambling wasn't for you, and that if you are to keep going, you would only end up paying more tuition. You might get a big win, but it's not gonna be big enough to make you stop. You're gonna eventually end up with a bigger loss. What's the hardest part about staying clean from gambling? I think that the hardest part for me comes from the stock market. This idea of sports betting or slots, I can see mathematically how the casino is supposed to win, right? If you look at the odds of a slot machine, there's return to player, there's a certain percentage of time that the casino is supposed to win that makes it unprofitable for you. It's baked into sports bets as well. It's just a little bit harder to see. But where I really struggle is the stock market, right? A stock option. Why do I have to lose? And the answer is that I don't actually have to lose that option. But if I keep going, eventually my luck is going to turn. It's not necessarily rigged against you, but if you're a gambling addict, you're never gonna stop. There's never a big enough win to satisfy you. So you're gonna keep going, and eventually your greed will consume you. You will lose that bet. And I'm calling it a bet, even though it's a thing available on a Robinhood app or a stock market app. So the hardest part for me is justifying staying away from bets that aren't necessarily rigged against me. But I know that I'm someone that can't stop once I start, so I just can't start. Does the craving to gamble ever actually go away? Yes. I think that a lot of my cravings to gamble were motivated by the fact that I was used to doing it. I became someone that was the gambler, quote unquote. I felt like I had to keep going, and when you're so used to doing something every day and it becomes part of your routine, it feels really weird. And my cravings were, get me back on routine, get me back into this situation where I felt like I had control, which is ridiculous because I had absolutely no control, but it made me feel comfortable that I was doing the same thing at the same time every single day. In recovery, I found things that actually mean something to me. I found this content, I found ways to plug in my time that make me feel good about what I'm doing. And so the craving, it's not that it's gone, it's just shifted. It's not that I feel like I have to gamble to be happy anymore. So that's absolutely gone, but I still do feel a compulsion to do things with my time. and keep busy and keep moving forward and keep making progress. But now it just feels like I actually have a chance to make that progress, whereas before I was just lying to myself. But yes, the cravings do go away. If you look at the physical structure of your brain, it'll rewire and you'll crave the dopamine from gambling less between 3 weeks and 3 months after you stop. How did gambling affect your relationships, and how did you rebuild trust? Gambling destroys relationships, and it absolutely destroyed a couple of mine. It wasn't like they were like, ew, you're a gambler, like I don't like you. It was more just I was never present in the moment. I wasn't really there. And from a romantic relationship side, I was a bad boyfriend. I didn't really care what the person was going through if I had a bet on. I had more important things to think about, more important things to do. And I would always think they'll forgive me once I get a big win and I pay for dinner or something like that, right? It's this big shot mentality that leads to just a really not great relationship. In terms of friendships, it was more, lying about what I was doing with my time, sometimes borrowing money for gambling under false pretenses. And so in recovery, the relationships didn't quite come back together for many reasons, gambling being one of them. But friendships really did come back together because as I became more present in the moment and I started to actually care about what my friends were going through, stop lying to them about the fact that I needed money to gamble, there was really nothing to fight over. And so over time, through good actions, things got better. The same goes with my family, right? When I was gambling, I lied to them constantly. I even made up a business one time so that they would invest in it so that I could have gambling money. And in recovery, it took a while for trust to be reestablished, but as you keep doing the next right thing, people will find a reason to trust you. So don't worry about how long it's going to take, just keep doing the next right thing. And if the relationship's meant to come back together, it absolutely will. What advice would you give to someone who wants to quit but doesn't feel ready? Keep gambling. That's what I would say. It's kind of this like old-timey Alcoholics Anonymous type response, but basically when you would go into one of those meetings, especially with the older guys a couple years ago, and you'd go in and you say, man, I really want to go for a drink. Like I want one more. They'd slap a $5 bill down on the table. They'd tell you to go do it. To a certain extent, if you're not ready to stop, you're not going to stop. The point at which someone quits gambling is when the pain of gambling begins to outweigh the pain of not gambling. So you have to reach this point where gambling actually causes you more pain than not gambling. And to get there, you have to gamble. And so I could easily tell you, stop gambling. It's bad for you. Don't do this. But you're not going to listen to me if you're not ready to quit. So what I would say is do your thing, but start to ask yourself genuinely the question of, why am I doing what I just did? And if you eventually don't have an answer to that question, it might be the point where the pain of gambling is beginning to outweigh the pain of not gambling. What did you do with your time once you stopped gambling? I started to make YouTube videos. Let me tell you about how this happened because I think it's a little bit funny. Following my relapse on November the 12th of 2022, I went back into a support group meeting and a guy pretty close to my age had stopped showing up right around the same time. So I gave him a call and I said, hey man, what's going on? He said, listen, I went back to gambling. I said, why? And, he was going through it, his own personal situation. But I said, listen, God knows I don't know how to stop this at this point. But I know you don't want to do the same thing that I just did because I'm about to clock in for my third shift of the day. You don't want to live the same life that I'm living right now. And he said, you know what, you're right. And he ended up coming back in, and to this day, he hasn't placed a bet. I didn't do that for him. He did all the hard work, but I'd like to think I was part of that initial push to get him back into meetings. And so I felt really good about that. And I was the first time in a long time where I felt like I was contributing to the world. And I said, let me do that. I'm going to record myself. I'm going to put it on YouTube saying the same thing, and I'm going to get 1 million views and everyone's going to love me. And so I did. I recorded it and I put it on YouTube and I posted it and I got 5 views. 1 was from my girlfriend, 1 was from my mom, and 2 of them were my own burner accounts. And I said, screw it, that's not it. Forget it, I'm not going to do it anymore. And my girlfriend says to me, hey, your video sucked. I said, wow, love you too, thank you. She said, the reason that it sucked is because you tried to be someone that you're not. You tried to sound like a doctor. You tried to sound like you knew what the answers were. Just be yourself. Put it on TikTok and people might like it. I said, TikTok's stupid. I'm not going to put it on TikTok. She said, just do it. She was right. I posted a video I shot in the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru of myself talking about how roulette's not 50-50. The video ended up doing over 1 million views. And from that day forward, I started making content every single day about my gambling addiction story. And so all that to say, I found something to do with my life that gave me a sense of purpose. It ended up being creating this content, but it sure didn't start out too strong. It was not about getting views. It wasn't about being a success. It was about doing something that I thought was going to help someone else. How do you deal with guilt or shame from what happened? looking at guilt very objectively, it does nothing for you. Shame also does nothing for you. So this idea of like, I can't believe I did this. Why didn't I stop? I should have cashed out at this point. It's not helpful. And you're leading yourself down a path where you're giving yourself an excuse to go back. Why didn't I just stop? I wish I had done this instead. Your brain is going to say, well, you could do that this time. You can stop earlier this time. You can put this bet in on this team this time. It'll be different this time. So it's not worth making yourself feel bad. What you need to do is you need to look back at the past mistakes as things that you're never going to do again. Learn from the lessons that you've created in your life rather than using them as excuses to make more mistakes. Do you still watch sports or go to casinos? I can watch sports, but they're a little bit stale. I've been trying to watch the Eagles games this year, and we run the ball too goddamn much. It just goes straight up the middle, a bunch of dudes running into each other. It's a bit boring. I'll probably watch basketball because I find it to be like technically more exciting, but I could also go without all of it. So you need to know yourself. Are you watching sports because you're a gambling fan or because you're a sports fan? And if it's because you're a gambling fan like I was, it might not be worth watching some of them. It really depends on you and how you feel about the game that you're watching. But I absolutely don't go to casinos. There's no reason to go. There's other places to go. And you're just putting yourself in a situation that you wouldn't really need to be in. Groups like Gamblers Anonymous say to avoid people, places, and things that will tempt you to gamble. And I think on that, they're completely right. If you found a way to win, would you go back to gambling? This is a really interesting question to me because I think like logically, you would say, yes, I should go back because you would make money. To me, gambling was always a challenge. It was a way of proving that I knew what I was doing. And if I knew I was gonna always win, I think I would get bored of it eventually. There was actually this episode of The Twilight Zone where a guy was basically in purgatory and he got to make one wish. And his wish was that he would always win when he gambled. And within a couple of weeks, he was miserable because every time he placed a bet, he would win, but it was the same predictable outcome. And it felt like he wasn't accomplishing anything anymore. And I think that's kind of what would happen to anyone that consistently won. Now, of course, this is a pipe dream and you can't actually do it, but it's a really interesting thought experiment. I wasn't gambling to make money. I was gambling to gamble again. Any money that I made became ammunition to make another bet. And I viewed myself as someone that was a good gambler. So seeing as that was my identity, that's all I cared about. It wasn't necessarily about the winning, even if I said it was at times. What does a good day in recovery look like for you now? A good day is just quite the opposite of one of the bad days, I guess. A good day in recovery is waking up, doing something that you're passionate about, and not going to bed at the end of the night feeling guilty about it. I go to the gym, I work on my projects, I work on these videos, and I feel good about it, even if I don't make that much tangible progress. Like, I'd love to tell you I wake up at like 4 a.m. and I follow this insane morning routine, but it's just not true. A good day in recovery is just making tangible progress forward, whether it's 1 step or 10 steps. Whereas a day in my life as a gambling addict was waking up and constantly chasing the feeling of feeling okay all day by placing yet another bet. It's a peaceful life. It's not always a super exciting life, but it's a much better way of living than I had ever had before. So these were some questions that y'all had asked me about my gambling addiction story. If you want to hear my full gambling addiction story, check this video out next, and let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.